Laurie Huston's News for the Heart is dedicated to helping you give a voice to your own soul. Our hearts have the power to free us from pain and the struggles that keep us from awakening to our true essence. Join Laurie now as we delve into our heart and soul to find the path that will open us to the possibilities and lead us to the life we love to live.
And good afternoon. This is News for the Heart. Well, it's been a few months, and we'll get to why. We're going to have Tom Campbell on the show today, and we're going to talk about a little bit about self-centeredness. Maybe we can get into, how we can work on that, maybe some healing around that. Tom, you've been doing some great work recently. You've done a lot of online stuff. Unfortunately, had to cancel some of your trips. But you've been doing a lot of healing circles. You've been doing some really nice stuff. So it's great to have you on the show. It's been a couple months. Part of the reason was because 2 months ago, pretty much right before the show, someone that I knew that is supposedly, on the same journey we're all on, but, done a lot of the same workshops that I've been to. Anyway, she made a comment about how, it was more, like a conspiracy type thing, but that, why are we worried so much? It's really only the old people that are dying. And maybe it was because my aunt had just passed away from COVID issues, but it was more the fact that, how are we at this place that, oh, well, it's just the old people that are passing, so, who cares? This is why there's so many debates about school system, because we don't really know what to do with the kids come September. And I know they're making decisions right now about that, at least here in Canada, but we don't really know. One kid, we know how kids spread it around. Look at lice or red eye. They spread really quickly with kids. Yes, those kids may not pass away, but those kids have parents who have friends, who have grandparents, who they're going to meet somebody who is not in perfect health, and they could pass. So I was at the time a little bit angry because I thought this person should know better. But I wish it was just this person, because I've heard a lot of the same things, and they're still talking about it. This is one of the reasons with the school system. There are still people out there that say, yes, they should be going back to school. They need the interaction. And I agree, they need interaction. But should they be going back to school? I don't know. Can we keep them safe? And it's not just the kids that's the problem. And they're all saying the same thing. Well, it's just the old people that are passing. Well, yeah, the old people plus a lot of people that have other underlying conditions. So anyway, this is why we didn't have a show 2 months ago. And last month, well, that was a power outage thing that was a planned thing. But yes, anyway, glad to have you back.
Glad to be back. We always have fun. So let's talk about that. I have people in my, circle of friends and neighbors and so on, my social circle, that sometimes are very surprising also with the, dysfunctional attitudes that they have. The non-loving, non-caring, self-centered attitudes, even though, most of the time they seem to, at least talk the talk pretty well. I think what we're seeing, and I think it's a wonderful thing that we are now seeing something different than that. That used to be the norm. Everybody felt that way. That was the norm. I just looked at a little movie that was made for YouTube that talked about the, what was it called now? The big flu epidemic.
Spanish flu?
Spanish flu, yeah, big flu epidemic at the end of the 1800s, early 1900s. And that killed millions of people up to several million, multiple millions of people.
I think it was like 40 million. I remember looking it up just recently.
Yeah, lots and lots of people died from that. After it went through, countries had labor shortages. I mean, it was a really serious disease, and it went through 3 times.
Right.
Went through once and killed a whole lot of people. The second time, it killed 2 or 3 times more than that. The third time, it killed a little more than the first time, but not nearly as much as the second time. And each time, I think it went through again as a mutation.
Right.
So it comes around, and whether we're going to see that yet in COVID-19 or not, we don't know. But when you looked at that, basically, there were little pockets of people here and there where there were good people who were, maybe good leaders or good examples, where they did wear face masks and they did try to do social distancing. San Francisco was one of those places that it was a law that you had to wear. If you went out in public, you had to have a mask on, much as it is today. But they were the exception, the very rare exception. Almost all the country, except for just a few places here and there that had more intelligent leadership, they just kept on keeping on as usual, and people were dropping dead, but nobody really did anything about it. Everyone went on in the same way. They still had large meetings. They still, all went to the beach, and millions of people were dying. And it wasn't just the old people. Right. In the first wave, it was mainly old people. In the second wave, it was old people, young people, middle-aged people. It was everybody. Mm-hmm. And I'm not sure about the third wave, but the third wave just wasn't as deadly as the first two. It was a more benign version that you'd get a little sick, but most people just got over it. It didn't kill a whole lot of people, I don't believe. Compared to the second one anyway, it looked benign compared to the second wave. Anyhow, that was just the way it was in the early 1900s. They
didn't have TV. They didn't have any way, other than papers, I guess. They didn't really have any way to communicate the problems.
No, I don't know if they had, did they have radio by then?
Yeah, they might have had radio.
They may have had radio by then.
But also, weren't we going through a drought? I mean, there was a whole bunch of issues at the time. But, yeah.
There was. And some followed that because, we had then the Roaring '20s roared right after that, after that was done, because it was done just about 1918, 1919. Then the 1920s, there was boom times. But then by the 39 was the Big Depression, which then lasted a long time. So there was a lot of stuff going on in the early 1900s. But anyway, most of the people just ignored it with the idea of what can we do? It's a disease. We just live with it. Well, that is a very self-centered viewpoint. And it's not that the people are not nice people. It's that they are self-centered, and in their reality, things that don't affect them are not important. If it doesn't affect me and mine, then it's just not all that important. So they don't notice, it's not on their radar that, if I get sick, if I don't wear a mask and I get sick, and I just interact with people normally, then at least 6, 7, 8, 10 people that I know are also going to get sick because I'll give it to them. And each of those 10 people gets sick, and then they get 10 more people sick, and each of those gets sick, and each one of those gets 10 more sick. And you see in a week or two, you go from one sick person to hundreds of sick people just from one person. Now, out of those hundreds of people who are sick because I got sick, 2 weeks later, there's maybe 100, 200 people who are sick in my chain that wouldn't have been sick if I hadn't gotten sick. Or maybe they would have gotten it from somebody else, but I'm the one that, was their source, that it's been passed along. Now, out of those hundreds of people, there's bound to be some old people, some young people, there's bound to be some deaths out of that. So almost anybody who gets sick is likely to contribute to multiple people dying from this illness directly, in the sense that, if they hadn't gotten sick, those people wouldn't have died. Well, again, not necessarily. They may have gotten it from somebody else, but still, that's a sobering thought, and it makes you responsible for not getting sick, that you wear a mask, that you keep the distancing, because you don't want to make hundreds of other people sick and probably tens of people drop dead just because you were careless. Yeah. Well, that requires you to think about other people. Other people have to be on your radar screen. And people who are very self-centered, that's below their radar screen. They don't see it. Maybe if you explained that to them intellectually, they could go, okay, I understand the math, but they still wouldn't see it. It wouldn't be part of what was important to them. Right. What's important to them is themselves and others that are in their inner circle, their friends, their family, their loved ones. Those are important. Everybody else, not so important. And it's not that they intellectually would hurt anybody else. It's just they don't notice. So it's not that these are evil people. It's just that they're so self-centered that their reality is small. When you're self-centered, your reality is just a little reality. It's got you and your people in it. And after that, the other people out there aren't really so real. They're just part of the minions that stir around and out there that isn't part of mine and therefore isn't important. It's kind of that attitude. So it's just a measure. It's just a matter of how self-centered people are. Now, self-centeredness is a measure of how mature people are. When you're very young, when you're born, you're very self-centered because it's just you and a hostile world out there. And if you want to have your diaper changed or get something to eat, then you scream. I have needs. Somebody help me. So it's all about you, and it's self-centered. But from the day you're born to the day you die, your job is to get rid of that self-centeredness. That's a measure of your maturity. People who are mature aren't self-centered. They think about others. They care about others. Others are on their radar. They see how the things they do affect others, and it's important to them. They notice those things. If you're immature, you don't really think about others. Again, doesn't make you a mean person. It's just those other people don't count. You see that often with people driving their cars. They matter, and what they want and the fact that they want to get where they're going faster or whatever is important to them, but nobody else really matters. It's almost like, it's in a video game. They're just little characters being played out there on the road, but they're not really real people kind of thing. So there's no need to pay any attention to them. They just barely exist. Many, many years ago, before we had worldwide communications, it was like that for most people, because we didn't really relate to people on the other side of the planet. Somewhere in Indonesia, there was a big earthquake and 100,000 people died. Oh, well, what other news is there? That's not particularly important. We didn't care about that because it doesn't affect us. And if it doesn't affect us, it's not really real. It's not really important. It's not in our little reality. So now, though, this isn't 100 years or 200 years ago. This is now. And we've had internet and we've had TV and we've had other communications where these people on the other side of the planet are real people. They're not just somebody over there is having a problem. We can see them. We can see the terror and the sadness and the tears that they're crying. And if you have any sense of humanity or caring about other people, then your heart goes out to them. You connect with them. So we've shrunk from this large globe of strangers, primarily strangers, and just our little town and our little neighborhood is important, very provincial viewpoint, to a much bigger viewpoint where everybody's family, everybody on the planet, it's the human family. And you relate to people and you care about people in the human family. You see, so that's a difference between being very self-centered, not being very self-centered, being very immature or being mature. And this level of maturity or immaturity has nothing to do with your age. There's lots of people who are 50, 60, 70 years old and very immature, still very self-centered. And there's some people who are only 10 years old and very mature, very connected to the bigger picture and to other people. So it's not so much an age thing as it is a growing up, becoming love, raising the quality of your consciousness, all those things we talk about all the time. That's the maturity yardstick, is how self-centered are you? How big is your decision space? How many people in the world matter to you? If it's like 6, well, that's not very many, and everybody else, whether they live or die, who cares? Not my problem, you see. So that's the thing. We're turning a corner now as we get into the information age. We went from a place that nobody really cared much except what happened in their little town. And then we got what happened in their big city. And then we got bigger we care about what happens in our country. If there's an earthquake in our country, well, we care about that. But if it's in some other country right next to us, well, we sort of care a little, but not too much. But if it's in some other country, some other part of the world, we don't care at all. It just doesn't touch us. So we went from that back in the 1900s to where we are now with the up close and personal viewpoints into everywhere in the world, just about. And that's helped a lot of people grow up. That's helped a lot of people see a larger reality. So here we go, 100 years after the 1900s, early 1900s, right up to 1920. Well, now here we're at 2020. So it's just about 100 years ago. And now we have this COVID-19 comes through. And people all over the world start to put on masks, stay home, businesses close so that people won't pass it around. It's like we need to stop this thing before it gets too big. Otherwise, we'll overwhelm the hospitals. We'll overwhelm all the help that's available, and a lot of people will needlessly die from it. So we see a worldwide response that's never been seen before. Yeah. We had flu go around last year, the year before that, there's been swine flu and Hong Kong flu, and I remember flus going through when I was just a kid, in elementary school. And sometimes the schools would close because there weren't enough students or teachers who, weren't sick to make it worthwhile paying salaries. So they closed schools. But that was only because there weren't enough kids or teachers around. It wasn't because they didn't want to pass the sickness around. It was different reasons. So we've always had those, and we've always just shrugged them off and said, well, nothing we can do about that. Flus come, flus go, people die. It's just life. Nothing can be done. But this time we didn't do that. So I'm seeing a much better quality of consciousness in the world in general this time around than we've ever seen before. But we still have a lot of those same people who were around back in, 1915 and 1916 and 1917 when the Spanish flu was going around, and just shrugged their shoulders and said, who cares? It's just old people. It's just not that they don't like old people and they want all the old people to die. That's not the point. It's just not in their reality. Their reality is small. And within that small reality, they can say, I'm a very spiritual person. I'm grown. I understand. Love is the answer. It's all about caring and growing up and quality of consciousness. Inside that little reality, they can have all those ideas, but that doesn't mean they have it at the being level. It just means they have it at the intellectual level. They talk about it. What do they say? They talk the talk. but they don't walk the walk. When it comes time to be it, they say, it's just old people. Not important. It's not that important to us. Why should we close businesses and have kids stay out of school just because of a bunch of old people? They're going to die sometime soon anyway. That kind of an attitude. It's, we think how mean, how nasty, and it shocks us, but it's not so mean and nasty as it just is. Those people don't really exist for them. They're almost like little cardboard cutouts on the side of life that just are, moving around, but don't really mean anything. They're not real people. They just are other. And that's what's going on. So, yeah, well, we have a lot of those. It's not like there's only one or two of those showing up. We have a lot of those people out there who just are still living in a small reality. And in that little reality, old people dying from COVID-19 just isn't important. It's not something that you should be concerned with. Well, we're in transition, and I think it's good. We have grown up a lot in this world, so that this time we're taking it more seriously. We're caring about everyone. And though it began in a way that most children got a very light case of it, that's not necessarily true anymore.
No.
We're seeing people in their 20s who are very healthy, athletic people, not people with, compromised lungs or anything, but healthy people. And they're dying from this thing, mostly because they're not getting help until it's too late. This is a very insidious disease. And if you don't get medical attention early on, by the time you get to the point that the symptoms are such that you decide you need to go to a doctor, it's too late to do anything about it. Your lungs are already so compromised, and your heart and your liver and your kidneys and everything else, that there's nothing to do but, try to make you comfortable until you pass on. So that's where the younger people, they're saying, I just don't feel good or something. It's just this or that. I'll shrug it off. And by the time it's, I can't shrug it off, I better go see somebody, then too late. So we're seeing a fair number of people outside of the old people category who are also dying from this thing. It's a very dangerous disease. And like you say, children are infamous for their lack of public hygiene, understanding. I mean, children, they're doing this, and it's, they never wash their hands. You almost have to browbeat them, to get them to wash their hands. They don't want to wash their hands. It's just too much trouble or something. So they just don't do things that adults would normally do that are better public hygiene. They don't necessarily cover their face, when they sneeze or when they cough. They just are being little kids that still don't understand a whole lot about the world and how it works. So their public, hygiene is horrible. So anybody who has children in the, daycare up through about 6th grade or 7th grade knows that they bring home diseases every week. And that they tend to not get terribly ill. They get sniffles, they get coughs, they kind of work their way through it. But their parents get sick. Their parents, get much more ill than they do. And their grandparents would probably get even more ill yet. So that's the way we live normally. Children pass diseases around, pass everything around, ringworm, and like you say, pink eye, and lice, everything they get, it just spreads through the schools because children are messy, and they're not into washing hands or caring about other people because they're all very self-centered. Those other people in their world don't really hardly exist either. That's just the way it is when you're a child. You're self-centered. You're immature. Well, they have an excuse for being immature. They're children. When you're an adult, being immature is a choice.
Yes.
It's choices that you make. It's choices that you don't see, don't care about others. So I think that's why we're seeing it. These aren't bad people. They're people with small realities. And many times, it's shocking, but many times people who sound fairly grown up, like they have a big understanding because they say all the right words. Yes, they've been to the training courses and the workshops and the retreats, and they know all the right words to say and how to say them, and they probably even believe it themselves, that they are very well grown up. In their own minds, they're, highly evolved spiritual people. But it doesn't really help them grow up any at all for them to have the ideas in their intellect. The only way to grow up is if you change who you are at the being level. So when you bump into some of these people, you've been around them a long time, but you've never actually seen them in a position where who they really are kind of shines forth, to where they kind of show you what's at their being level. And when they do, it's a shock. So, yeah, that's just where we are. But I think it's good news in the sense that the majority of people are taking it serious. The majority of people, and not just here or in Canada, but all over the world, they're taking it seriously. It's the small minority of people who are still so self-centered that they can't see they can't see the fact that them getting sick will end up with killing people. If just they get sick and they continue and they don't wear a mask and they infect other people who infect other people and so on, some people down that line are going to die who otherwise wouldn't have died if they had worn a mask. So not wearing a mask means you're willing to put other people's lives at risk and likely kill people. That's pretty heavy realization. And these people don't realize that. I mean, that's the nature of disease. That's why it's so hard with a disease that spreads easily to contain it, because everybody that gets it who does their normal life and bumps into, a dozen, 2 dozen other people in a day, people where you eat in a restaurant, people at work, people at home, just you bump into other people where you shop, and you're going to give probably half of those your disease if it's very contagious, maybe more than half. And they're going to do the same thing. And then those are going to do the same thing. So you see 10 becomes 100, becomes 1,000, becomes 10,000, and that's just through 3 iterations. Well, in months, you're going through 10 iterations. So that's why we have, at least in the US now, like 75, 80,000 people every day, coming, going to hospitals and being diagnosed with COVID. There's probably 2 or 3 times that many who get sick that don't ever get to the hospital with it, but they're still passing it on to other people who pass it on to other people.
Yeah, I guess it's the asymptomatic ones that are really the big problem. And how do you deal with that? Because they don't even know, but
yes, you have that as well. So you can't stop that. But what you can do, it's all a matter of probability. By wearing a mask and keeping distance, you're just decreasing the probability that you will get ill or that you will make anybody else ill. Right. And that's all. It's not like the mask makes it such that nobody will get sick. All it does is reduce the probability that people will get sick. If you reduce the probability, then fewer people end up at the hospital, fewer people end up dead. So it's a matter of playing with the probabilities. Same with distancing. You could have somebody breathing 100 feet away from you, put out little droplets with COVID-19 on them, and if the wind was just right, it could carry those little droplets 100 feet away, and you would snuff them up your nose when you breathe, and you would get it from somebody 100 feet away. That's possible. It's just not so likely, so it's all probability. You put the mask on and catch those droplets in the mask, now you've just, you've lowered the probability that you're going to make somebody sick. So it's not that distancing will always keep you healthy. Distancing will sometimes get you sick too, but it lowers the probability. So everybody's taking risks. Anybody that goes out with a mask, without a mask, even if you keep 20 or 100 feet between you and other people, it's not like your risk goes to 0. It just gets lower. And if you don't wear masks, then your probability of catching it or transmitting it, the probability goes way up. So it's a probability game. None of these things that we do, like wearing masks and distancing, are perfect solutions. They're all just trying to, adjust the probabilities to a point that it's better for everybody. So anyway, don't be too upset with people who are like that. That's just the way they are. And it's not that they're evil people. They just have a small reality. When we think that each of us lives in our own reality, we each have our own private reality that we live in. Oh, it's not entirely private. We have other people in it. It's a multiplayer game, so there's other people in the shared space of it, but everybody lives in their own reality. And in your reality, there's lots of people out there, and they're worth caring about. In other people's reality, there's lots of people out there, but I don't know them. They're not connected to me, and I just can't make myself care about kind of like pretend people who don't really exist in my reality. And it's a different viewpoint. But people have to grow up, and they grow up in their own way, in their own time, and getting it intellectually doesn't help you grow up. Well, it might help you grow up, but it doesn't make you grow up.
No. And I totally understand why some of this is getting out of control. I mean, in the spring when it was cooler, people didn't maybe mind so much staying inside. But as it gets warmer and warmer and warmer, and then the younger you are, the more extrovert you are, the more you want to be around friends. I mean, I guess we just need to see it from this new normal. It's like we're stuck wanting the past to be.
Yeah, we want things to be the same. We don't like change.
We don't want change.
Yeah, that's the thing. We like to keep on doing the same things we've always done. But there's challenge in change. And wherever there's challenge, there's growth opportunities in change. So in a way, this is offering a lot of people an opportunity to grow up, to see a bigger picture, to understand a bigger picture. So in that case, it's a good idea. But people don't generally like change.
Right.
They want things to be the same. But again, okay, if you really need to get out, if your children are going, stir crazy inside your house, well, go out. Yes, you'll raise the risk a little bit, but if everybody's wearing masks and you do distancing, then you'll keep the probability as low as possible that you'll get the disease or transmit the disease. So go to a playground that's not full. You may have to drive a little further, to get there. Go out in the country someplace, take a walk on a trail, do things together. And if you want to have a couple other of the children's little friends along, fine. You bring a couple of other little kids along, but wear masks. Stay distanced. Keep the probability low. If you go to a place and it's crowded, turn around and leave. Go someplace else. Do something else. So do what you can do. Take the amount of risk that you think you can take versus the probability if you do get sick, then what's the probability you're going to pass it on to somebody?
Right.
Who passes it on to somebody who passes it on to their grandmother in a nursing home, who then kills 60 people. You have to realize that you're taking responsibility. And if you're starting to get a fever and aren't feeling too well after your outings and things like that, well, then you need to get checked very quickly. Find out what you've got. Treat it as if it is serious until you find out it isn't. So it's not a matter of being perfectly safe or doing things that are 100% protective or whatever. It's take the risks that you feel like you have to take to live your life, but then be responsible about those risks and try to lower the probability to be something that you can live with.
Mm-hmm.
So
and maybe not have political campaigns that have thousands of people at them, but
yeah. Right, things like that, right? So
yeah, things like that.
Yeah, exactly right. So, if there's a big event, then don't go to it. And, Other people shouldn't, but other people do. It's their choices, and we have to live with them too. They're part of our, they're part of our world, and we have to care about them too, even though they don't seem to care about anybody but themselves. But we have to care about them too. They're part of it. They have to grow up on their own. We can't make them grow up.
Yeah.
So you just have to accept that's the way it is. There'll be some people who just won't wear a mask and who will go around coughing on people just because they think it's funny. There were people who would do that. Just very self-centered people. Sometimes it's people that just want attention.
That's true.
That's how they get attention. They're self-centered and they're insecure. They need attention. But whatever it is, they're part of us as well. And we need to have some compassion for them, for wherever they are in their little world, doing what they do, and accept that that's just part of our reality, is that we have to live with them and live with them as best we can. So it's, in times like this, you just do the best you can with what you have, and try to keep the probability low that you're going to hurt other people. And otherwise, live your life. You don't have to stay inside your door with your house locked. You can go out, you can walk, you can drive. Your car is, keep your windows up, your air conditioning on. Your car is probably a pretty safe place. You can drive around, sightsee, get to some place that's not crowded. You get out, walk around, take a hike. You can still do things.
Yeah.
You just can't do them in a crowd of people. You have to do them with 2 or 3 or 4 people all wearing masks and being careful. It's not so bad. We adjust. It's not like, this is the most terrible thing that ever happened to anybody. It's not. We'll get by. It's harder on some than others. I have a lot of empathy for businesses, and their business depended on crowds, like entertainment places and places, that serviced, children's parties where you go bounce on things. And, they basically, their whole business is based on crowds. A lot of people coming, and, they're in a hard space right now because that's not a good business to be in. But, life is like that.
Yeah, it's not a zombie apocalypse.
No, it's not a zombie apocalypse. Things will work out, and there are other things. There's other things to do. Other businesses are booming. I got a guy who had his own. I know a guy who had his own business in digital learning, digital communications. Off what do we call it? Online learning, I guess. Out of the brick and mortar onto the internet, and suddenly his business is booming. His business now is doubled and tripled and growing that he can't keep up with how much business he has. People who deliver packages, their business is booming. There's more and more people ordering things that need to be delivered. So there's lots of other businesses that are the sun is shining on them, and they're growing and being very profitable. And others have been hurt very badly. But life is like that. This just happens. Earthquakes, storms, hurricanes, it does that. Some businesses, the buildings get flooded, and other businesses don't. It's just a part of life that stuff happens. And we have to have empathy for all the people who've gotten the bad end of the stick on this thing, and see if we can't help them out a little bit. And the people who are on the happy end of that stick, maybe they can do some sharing as their profits double and triple. Maybe they can help out others. I don't know how all that's going to work downstream, but still, I'm very encouraged by our attitude, our humans' attitude this time. We're better. We're better this time. Not all of us, but a lot of us. Enough of us to make a difference.
Yeah.
That's impressive. Yay us.
Yay us. Yeah. Because it's a tough time for people, but you're right. People have come together. Some people, are very aware and want to maintain that, gentle kindness that is really where we should all be coming from. It's where our heart should be.
Yeah. Well, we've seen it. Like I said, you see it everywhere. You know, you see those people out on the road in their cars, and they cut people off, and they do all these things like nobody's important except for them. Right. You know, and they have that attitude. What they need and their needs to get someplace, that's important, and nobody else is. You know, we get that attitude lots of places. You know, you go to a doctor's office, and it's almost like there's a required 30-minute wait, you know, before you can be seen. You know, it's because their time's valuable and yours is not. You know, it's an attitude that people find themselves and their people to be important. And for those people, they're kind, they're generous, they're giving, you know, they're all those things. And they take care of people and they share. But as soon as you step outside of that inner circle, those other people, doesn't matter. They're not important. You don't have to care about them. You know, they could live or die. Matters not to you. They're just not in your reality. So we see that in all sorts of walks of life. It's not just with diseases and not just driving cars or, you know, in doctors' waiting rooms. We see that all over where people live in their own realities. And sometimes those realities are just little. They don't have bigger pictures. They have little pictures. It just happens to be where they are. And they'll grow up when they're ready. But something like this, I think, helps them grow up, because now they have a whole lot of people trying to engage them. And whoa, wait a minute, you need to care about those old people. Whereas before, nobody really engages them because it doesn't show. You can get around in your little reality. So in that way, it's also good. There's probably a lot of people who have taken second thoughts and third thoughts and say, oh, okay, I see it now. Yeah. Well, that's tremendous.
Yeah.
So this thing isn't all bad. This thing has its, you know, like all storms, it's got that silver lining in there someplace. You just have to look for it.
Yeah, for us, we had, in the beginning, definitely more of our homes for the elderly were a bad place. And we brought the Army in, and they were able to observe some of the terrible ways we treat our elderly in some of these homes. And ironically, apparently, it was some of the private homes versus the public homes that were worse. But we became more aware of some of the situations that we kind of hid behind by not, you know, just not caring if we didn't have an elderly person in one of the homes. We don't really think about it. We don't care about it because it's not in our radar.
Right. It's not in our reality. And if it's not in our reality, then, you know, we don't notice. There's a lot of things like that we just don't notice. Yeah. Well, we need to notice. We need to notice more of those things. Yeah, a lot of times the older people are really, really treated
poorly.
Very poorly. And they pay an awful lot to be treated poorly.
Yeah.
In many cases.
Yeah.
Oh, well.
But it's made us more aware. So it's made us more aware, and will probably create a lot of change, because people were outraged when, you know, the reports came out about how poorly some of these people were being treated. So it makes us aware, which is a good thing.
Yeah.
So,
did you have another subject, or are we out of time?
We're not quite out of time, but I guess, how can we leave this on a positive note of what can we do for, well, we can't really help change somebody else, but if we find ourselves getting frustrated or have little apathy, how do we shift out of that? Well,
often we feel, you know, we feel kind of depressed or unhappy because we see all these terrible things that are going on. And we see people, particularly people we care about, often family members who have little tiny realities and maybe have, a lot of fears and other dysfunctional things going on with them. And that's upsetting to us because these are people we care about, friends of ours, family of ours, and we see this dysfunctionality going on in there. We see that they're generally not all that happy people. They're just getting by, or they're struggling, or they're, they generally aren't real happy people, because happy people don't have those attitudes. Happy people have bigger pictures. But in any case, we have to look at them with the idea that everybody is doing the best they can with what they've got. True. That's where they are. That's what their reality looks like. You can't tell people, your reality's small. That doesn't help. No. Their reality is what their reality is. Their reality doesn't have these other things in it. So they are in the process of growing up. And we may be ahead of them in a sense that we've already seen that problem. We've already made those changes to ourselves. And now looking downstream, which is where we've come from, we have 20/20 vision. Oh, we can see people and we can say, oh yeah, look, that person, they're really hung up here and they have this fear and that fear, and look at them fighting all the time. Well, that's really dysfunctional, and we see all that. But when we were there fighting all the time and in that small reality, we didn't see it at all. And somehow we grew up. Now we look downstream and it's clear, but we have to let them get there on their own, in their own way and in their own time. We don't have any other choice. You cannot make anybody else grow up. You can't change anybody else's reality. You can talk to them. But if you talk to them, you have to talk to them in a way that is non-judgmental, in a way that is not preaching, that is not accusing. You can't talk to them like that. You have to talk to them in a way that they can actually listen to what you say. If you don't talk to them in a way that's very positive, you'll just make them worse. So if you fuss at them or tell them, that's awful, you're awful, how could you think that? That'll make them worse, right, not better. So you have to be positive. So what does that mean? You basically need compassion for these people. They're mostly not really happy people. Even the ones that are pretending that they are, very near enlightenment, and you see how they act is full of ego and full of fear, full of self-centeredness. They're not happy either. They're struggling. They often don't have a very high opinion of themselves. They know in some way inside that they're faking it. They're aware of that at an inside level, and it makes them insecure and sometimes makes them a little prickly. So they have to live with it. They're doing the best they can with what they've got, which means everything they've learned up to this time. That's what they've got. And you can't push them. You can't, make them. You can't do anything other than have some compassion for them and talk to them in a way that is very positive. That's the best thing you can do. And even then, they might not get it. Right. Well, they may have to learn it later, or maybe next time, or maybe the next 100 lifetimes. They'll still be working on it. But that's the thing about this place. You get to work on it just as long as it takes for you to get there. If it takes you another 100 lifetimes to work on that one issue, well, there they are. You just have to do it. So and all of those times, all those 100 lifetimes, you're going to be struggling and unhappy and miserable because you haven't learned to care yet. Joy and peace and tranquility and satisfaction comes from giving, not from taking. Yes. It comes from being grown up, from having a bigger reality and bigger decision space. That's where that comes from being self-centered and being immature and having a little reality. That's where pain and unhappiness and struggle and not thinking very highly of yourself. You're having a lot of negative attitudes toward others and towards yourself. All of that lives in that little space. So you either grow up or you're back in that little space struggling again. You know, that's the idea. So have compassion for those people. They're struggling and they are who they are, and we have to care for them anyway. We have to not make it worse for them, not make it harder for them to grow up by hollering at them or calling them names. You know, so that's the thing. It's easy to look downstream and see all the problems that people have. It's impossible to look upstream and see all the problems you have from the viewpoint of somebody else who's evolved more than you have and can look at you and see the problems that you still have. Well, we don't see them. They're invisible to us because we think our reality is all the reality there is. We don't realize that our reality is personal and that other realities would be more effective or more happy or more satisfying. We think our reality is just the way reality is. We think everybody lives in our reality. Our reality is the real reality. And it's not. Our reality is just our reality. And if it's not a happy, joyful one, then that's because we're not very grown up yet. We've got fear. We've got, you know, self-centeredness. We've got beliefs. We've got all those things that tie us to the fears. That's what the self-centeredness it really is. It's a fear.
Yeah.
It's a fear of not getting yours, not getting enough, not being appreciated, you know, that not getting the break, not getting what you deserve, not having enough resources. All of that self-centeredness really comes from fear. You know, there's me and there's this big world out there and I got to grab mine and make sure I keep it. You know, that's fear-based. So self-centeredness is just a fear-based thing. It's most of the beliefs are fear-based as well. So it's just the world we live in. And there are lots of people who have little realities, and we have compassion for them because that's where they are. And we have compassion for them because we know they're unhappy. They're mostly not full of joy, not full of sense of satisfaction. They're unsatisfied, joyless people struggling, trying to get by. So they deserve our compassion, not our anger. So that's how I say, how do you deal with these people? You deal with them not with anger, but with compassion, and accept them as who they are, because they just are that way. If they're your mother or your father or your children or, you know, your best friend or something, you just have to accept them. That's the way they are. Now, if they're constantly very annoying to be around, well, then don't spend so much time with them. You know, I mean, it's not like you have to, you know, always spend time with people who are downers, because they can drag you down by being a downer if you spend too much time in that downer space with them. But people that are family or friends or something, you're going to spend time with them and make it positive as you can. So that's how you deal with it. At least that's how you try to deal with it. It's always easier to say these things than it is to do them.
Yes. All right. Well, I think this has been a pretty good show.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's pretty timely. I think we have a lot of people who are frustrated with those that say, you know, it's their right not to wear a mask, you know, and so on, that they don't want to, and nobody can make me, and I'm a free person, and all those kinds of silly arguments. There's thousands of laws on the books that restrain people from doing whatever they want to do, you know. Yeah, being free doesn't mean you get to do anything you want.
Yeah.
This is a social space, and you do affect other people. And as you affect other people negatively, then somebody's going to make a rule to make you stop that. So that's just the nature of being a social animal.
All All right. Well, you've been listening to the News of the Heart. We've been getting to the heart of what matters with Tom Campbell. And we'll be back hopefully next month. Thanks.
Next month.
Have a question for Laurie and want to be on the next News from the Heart show? Drop us a line via instant feedback at bmajor.org. News from the Heart is brought to you by Intuitive Soul and is produced by Major Radio for Clear Channel's iHeartRadio and bmajor.org.